Houston, we have a podcast. You're listening to the premier Rockets podcast. It's H-Town Hoops, hosted by Brandon Scott and Adam Spolane.
That's right. It is the H-Town Hoops podcast. Brandon Scott and Adam Spolane in here with you. Glad to be with you and finally able to actually react this time, Adam. Instead of reacting to storylines and events, we get to actually react to a game. We get an actual basketball game, and unfortunately, we're not out there in Las Vegas to be able to cover these games. At least one of us, you would think would be able to be out there, but we're not. Instead, we have to watch it on television, and it was a pretty good watch. The Rockets come away with a 100-99 victory against the Portland Trail Blazers in the Summer League game. And more than anything, more than the result, I don't think we care as much about the result necessarily. We care about how the players look. And this was a very interesting game from the standpoint of having all four of the last 2 years first round picks playing, or the main guys playing, right? Jabari Smith Jr. and Tari Eason. And then, of course, Thompson and Cam Whitmore, the guys that were drafted this year, all on the court together. And we got to see that. All of these guys were in double figures. Jabari Smith Jr. led the way with 33 points, a big first half, a monster third quarter, and really just an impressive showing from these guys. 17 free throws. That's the number that stands out to me, Adam, is, hey, I went into this game thinking, hey, I would love to see Jabari Smith be a lot more aggressive of a player. I thought that in the first half, like, man, why isn't he attacking more? And then when he did attack, it looked a little bit clunky. And then things seemed to come together for him in the second half. Let's get your reaction, Adam, from watching these guys, specifically Jabari Smith and Tari Eason, the guys that we've seen play NBA basketball before. What did you think about those guys in Summer League in their debut this year?
Yeah, so I don't think Summer League is all that important when it comes to the rookies, because they're basically just getting their feet wet. And this is a whole new ballgame for them. You know, they're trying to figure this thing out on the fly. They've been part of the organization for 2 weeks. So you're asking these guys who have been in the organization for 2 weeks now to play they're trying to learn a bunch of different teams. Like, this is very difficult for rookies. The second year guys are the guys that really matter, especially when you have 2 second-year guys who played big minutes as a rookie. And they aren't normal second-year guys. One of them was the 3rd pick in the draft. The other was the 17th pick in the draft. Jabari Smith started his entire rookie season. I believe he was second team all-rookie last year. So that's the type of guy who should come into Summer League and just dominate it. He should be, without question, the best player on the floor. And for the first half, he wasn't. For the first half, he looked like a rookie. He looked like just one of these other guys that's on the floor. And Scoot Henderson is the headliner. Thompson was the headliner. But then you have just a bunch of other guys. You have the Jay Huffs of the world. You have some of these other guys. And Jabari Smith in the first half, he just looked like one of the other guys. 1 of 6, 4 points. Just, he did not look good. And to me, all of a sudden you're like, whoa, wait a minute. I should be seeing like improvement here. And I'm not seeing anything. And then the second half was a completely different story. And he completely took over the game in the second half. He was by far the best player on the floor. So he goes 1 of 6 for 4 points in the first half. The second half, he was 7 of 12 and he scored 29. I mean, 29 points on 12 shots. Again, it's Summer League. Level of competition isn't great. But you want the 3rd pick in the draft from last year, who played his entire rookie season. You want him to be the best player on the floor, and that's exactly what he was. He asserted himself. He made himself the guy in this game. He operated from different parts of the floor, and then he hit a game winner. So he rebounded the basketball. I didn't think he was great defensively, but again, it's Summer League. You're not exactly playing within, a defensive scheme or anything like that. I just thought it was a really impressive second half for him. And you hope that it's something that he can build on. With Eason, it just felt like Eason did more of what we saw all of last season, where he was a disruptor. He just made plays. And the one thing that, because you're always looking to see, okay, where is this guy better than he was a season ago? And I think with Eason, you saw maybe just a little bit more explosive. I don't know if it was something that you noticed, but he had that one poster dunk. I think it was in the second half.
Yeah.
And that's where you're like, okay, he got stronger. Like he worked on his legs. And one of the areas that he struggled in last year was just he struggled finishing at the rim. Well, if you're all of a sudden just going to be able to throw down dunks like that, then the finishing at the rim is going to be there for you. So I think all in all, for the two guys that mattered the most in this environment, Jabari Smith Jr. and Tari Eason, I think the Rockets saw exactly what they wanted to see. And I think it bodes well for them moving forward as we move into their second NBA seasons.
Yeah, Adam, the point that you mentioned about Tari, I noticed that as well. And even I would even go to his first jump shot. The first points that I think the Rockets scored of the game was a pull-up jump shot from Tari Eason. And even in that, he looked like just a more comfortable player. It's hard to really describe because you're really just talking about a really simple pull-up J. But I thought just watching, I was like, man, you know what? He looks like a lot more comfortable and confident. And I think he's still going to be somebody that you're going to have to reel in because he plays at only one speed. The one thing about Tari Eason, I think, is the positive. It's the good and the bad that you have to take with him is that he only knows one speed. It's full go with that guy. And I admire it. I think it's a more of a positive than a negative, certainly. But I would agree with your overall assessment that was pretty consistent and on brand with the Tari Eason that we had come to know as a rookie. So that part was really encouraging. On Jabari Smith, this is really the tale of two halves for me. Really interesting. And I just want to throw it back to you on him because the first half, like you mentioned, it looked really bad. Like I was prepared at that point. Once we reached halftime of this game, Adam, I was prepared at that point to be like, hey, man, I'm looking at the number 3 overall pick from last year and the number 3 overall pick from this year. And one thing is not like the other. Like Scoot Henderson immediately stood out. Scoot Henderson was immediately making plays. I feel like he hit his first 4 shots, if I'm not mistaken. And then the 2 shots that he missed after that looked pretty good. He just missed them. So, and he looked like the number 3 overall pick throughout the game. And it was Jabari for a little bit that I was like, man, this is concerning. Like Cam Whitmore, and we'll get to these guys in a minute, but Amin Thompson and Cam Whitmore look fine and all of that, and sure, whatever. But like you said, the guys that matter most in the beginning, I'm like, Jabari looks just like a dude out there. He doesn't look like anything. And then, like you said, it turns around in the third quarter, in the second half. What was it to you? Because like even with Jabari Smith, okay, his free throw, he missed his first 2 free throws.
They're ugly too.
And I'm like, what is
bad misses?
Adam, what is going on there? Because his form is, we've talked about this before too. His form is perfect. I don't know if I'd change anything about his mechanics. I'm really confused about his shot. Whenever he misses, I'm like, man, that looked good to me. Misses his first couple free throws. He looks nervous. He had a drive early in the first half where it was kind of clumsy and he gets blocked or he doesn't finish well. And I'm like, man, what's going on with this kid? And then he turns it on in the third quarter, in the second half, and you see what the numbers are. Explain it to me, Adam. What changed for this kid? What was it?
I don't know. I think that's the hard part with not being there. If we were there, that's like the first question is, okay, you kind of look not great the first half. Obviously, it changed after that. So because what I think might be different, he might say something totally the opposite. So I don't know what it was. I do think it's a little bit harder maybe for bigs in a summer league environment, just because it's going to be a very guard heavy oriented game. It's just the way that these games are played. So the guards are always going to have an advantage because, they're going to try and get to the rim as much as possible. Whereas, the bigs, they kind of need somebody to get them involved. We just saw this with Victor Wembanyama. He's a center and he struggled in his first summer league game. And that's just going to happen. I think that's just more of a big thing than anything else, where the bigs are going to struggle in this sort of an environment. But yeah, I don't really know what was different for him. I don't know if it was just a mentality change. I kind of feel like that's maybe all it was just a mentality change where he just kind of realized that this game is there for me. I can take this game over. There's nobody on the floor who is better than me.
Right.
And I think that's a really important step. And I think it does bode well for the future because he should have that should be his mentality whenever he steps out on the floor. And you would hope that you want every NBA player to really feel that way, and they all have that sort of an arrogance to them. That's why they're in the NBA, and there are very few people on the face of the earth who are better basketball players than them. But you want them to have that sort of confidence that, hey, nobody's better than me, so I can assert myself in this game, and nobody's going to be able to stop me. And I think he was able to do that. And you look at the shot chart; he was hitting shots from every area on the floor. He was at the rim, from the mid-range, from behind the three-point line. And that's where I think that he can be a tremendous player in this league. He's still not, I don't know he didn't seem a whole lot stronger to me. I'm sure he is, but the body looks pretty similar to the way that it looked when we last saw him in April. So
yeah, not to cut you off, I'm gonna let you finish. I was going to mention this, that the only thing physically that looked different about Jabari Smith is that he added a tattoo to either I think his left arm. He added a tattoo. That's the only thing that looks different. He looks the same size. I'm concerned about that because if there's anything that we can all agree about his game or about his whole, just everything about him in terms of basketball that needed to improve, it was that he needed to grow into that body. It needed to get stronger. And that's just something that has to happen sooner rather than later, hopefully, but it has to happen. I know he's young, but it has to happen for sure. And the only thing that looked different about his body was that he added the tattoo.
I told him I could help him gain weight. Like I know how to do it. And I told him if he needed help just to ask me, but he hasn't so far. We'll see what happens. But so I think because of that, the finishing isn't great. And I do think that it's going to be harder for him to finish in traffic, at least right now. But he does have the ability to beat you from the other two areas of the floor. And you can't block his shot from the mid-range. And I think that was something that he learned at one point last year. He had it was the Cleveland game at Toyota Center where he had a mid-range shot, basically a mid-range fadeaway from the elbow over Evan Mobley. And it's kind of like, well, if you can get that shot up over Evan Mobley, then you can get that shot up over everybody. So I think that he understands that shot is always there for him. And he's going to be able to make it, I think, at a pretty good clip just because of how good of a shooter he actually is. So, like, if you have that shot, then you're going to always be a threat, basically, from whenever you're on the floor. The three-point shooting, it was, hit or miss with him last season. It got better as the season went along. But that's something that he can do. So all in all, I do think that it's a positive step because, again, this is the first time that we've seen him play in a game in 3 months. And so you just want to see him be better. And, this is summer league competition. So it's not the best competition. It's not the best gauge of what he'll be next season, but it does show that maybe, from just like a physical standpoint, he hasn't changed a ton, but maybe from just like an overall skill level, maybe from a mentality level, that's where he has made the most strides from year 1 to year 2.
Jabari Smith Jr. again, 33 points, 7 rebounds. He did the 33 points on 8 of 18 from the field, 3 of 8 from the 3-point line, and then 14 of 17 from the free throw line. And let's see, what else do we have here? I said 7 rebounds, 2 assists, and a block. On Jabari, before we move on, what's a fair expectation for Jabari Smith going into year 2? Like, I mean, we can just be honest about it, and we have been, I think, on this podcast, and most people have. I don't mean to try to pull a straw man out of here like anybody hasn't been honest about Jabari Smith's struggles last year. But, I mean, 30.7% from field goal from the 3-point line. So he was a just under 31% from 3. We were expecting more than that. Just under 41% from the field. We expected more than that. Player efficiency rating 11.2. Probably expecting more than that. We were expecting more things from his game to translate, Jabari Smith Jr. as a rookie, than they did. Obviously, we're talking about this game specifically against the Blazers, the first game of the summer league, and he was excellent. We don't want to read too much in the summer league. We get it, but let's just speak generally on Jabari real quick before we move on. What's a fair and reasonable expectation for him? And we mentioned second team all rookie, pretty good. probably a much better second half to the season than it was to the first half. But going into year 2, in a year when the Rockets want to be serious, they've added veterans. They need him to be good, certainly to be much better than he was as a rookie. What's the fair expectation for him going into year 2?
I don't know. That's a good question because like we could sit here and put like accounting stats expectation, and I don't think that would necessarily be fair. And I don't think that I think that that's hard to put that on a player. This is the biggest cop out answer ever, but you just want to see improvement. Like that's really and I don't know.
Where though? That's cool. I want us to have nuanced conversations. I don't want us to just dumb it down and try to just have straight up hot takes. But I'm with you there. Improvement where, like, obviously the shooting. Is it the shooting, the awareness, the physicality? Like, I'm trying not to be too critical of this, Adam. But here's where I'm at. I just need to see improvement almost everywhere.
Yeah, well, that's
even in the spots where I thought he was going to be strong, Adam. Like, I just need to see it everywhere. And this was a good sign. This is a good step. This 33 in his first summer league game. But I need to see overall improvement from the guy. What do you think?
That's 100%. Like when you are going from year 1 to year 2, you should improve everywhere because there is not one part of your game when you're that young that you're a finished product in. So yeah, there should be improvement in every level of his game. Now, I think that he needs to be more efficient as a scorer. Does that mean he goes from a 31% 3-point shooter to a 35% 3-point shooter? I don't know. I don't know exactly how, if that's efficient enough. I don't know. I think that's it. I think that's hard to say. I don't know if that's something that you can do. I think that you should expect improvement, but I don't know just from like a stat line standpoint what that improvement looks like. So I just need to see him be more efficient. I need to look and see really quick because the free throws today,
Impressive.
that's not something. And listen, it's summer league refs; they aren't NBA referees. But to take 17 of them, and I think he missed his first 2, so he finished out the game 14 of 15 from the line. He only attempted 2.5 free throws last year. Now, I'm guessing, this is a guess. I'm assuming he's not going to take 17 free throws every single game. But if you can improve significantly on 2.5, that's going to help your efficiency right there. Like if you can just get to 4 free throws a game, I don't think that's I think going from 2.5 to 4 on paper, it looks big, but I don't think it should be that difficult for somebody of that size who has the ability to get up his shot whenever he wants. I don't think that's asking too much to go from 2.5 free throws to 4 a game. And if he's going to make 80% of them, he was 78.6 last year. If he's going to make 80% or somewhere near that number, that's a big improvement on the efficiency right there.
Yeah.
He was a good rebounder last year. He can certainly get better. He can probably be a little bit better defending the rim. I don't know. And we still need to see kind of what they're going to do from a scheme standpoint. Today, it looked like they were pretty much switching 1 through 4, at least early in the game. And then they kind of kept the 5-man, drop back. But I do need to see better defense just overall. He was not a good defender last year. I think that was the one skill that you were really banking with him that he was going to be great at. He needs to be better in that department. And I think part of that is just getting used to the NBA. So I think you said it perfectly. You just need to see improvement across the board. I don't think that it's necessarily a stat line improvement. I think that there are certain numbers that should be able to improve just naturally, just in just kind of linear development. But, you could go from, what was he last year? He was 12.8 points a game. You can go from 12.8 to 16. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're getting better. You know what I mean? It could be just more of, he averaged 3 more points a game, but he also took 4 more shots. So that's not really getting better in that standpoint. It's just getting up more shots. So I think that there are some clear areas, the free throw shooting being one, defense being the other, and just the efficiency. I think those are the 3 areas that you really need to see him get better at. But I don't know if there's like a stat line that I want to see.
Yeah, and I wasn't trying to necessarily reduce it to stats. I think it's more of how do you feel about this player when you watch them play? And I think and you especially as somebody that covered every game, and I watched every game, some of them twice, unfortunately. And why did I do that? I don't know, but like felt a lot better about him later on in the season, about how he was playing later on in the season. But even still, that even is on a curve because it's like, well, you were starting from the struggle bus. Like it didn't look great early on. There were some flashes there. They had that game against Milwaukee where he guarded Giannis really well, and that was early on in the season, relatively early on in the season, and there were flashes, but the consistency was never really there. You always like the work ethic and the attitude, but you're like, man, this guy needs to be a little bit more assertive. He needs to be a little bit more efficient. And the things that at the very least you think he's supposed to do well and they're supposed to translate early on, the defense, the knockdown shooting, some open shots, okay? He was one of the few people, like the Rockets didn't take a lot of good shots last year, okay? They took a lot of, or maybe a better way of trying to say it is they took a lot of bad shots last year, I thought. But Jabari Smith, I thought, took a lot of good shots, and he would just miss them. You know, and it was just so disappointing because you're like, oh, man, feels like he should be making that shot, especially as the number 3 overall pick. So for me, it just consistency, overall improvement. A big thing with Jabari, maybe this goes without saying, just based off of watching him, looking at him physically. I already mentioned that the only thing different physically was the tattoo on his arm. Dude's got to muscle up. You know, like I just from my perspective, there was like a thought, and we've had this discussion too, I think, on the podcast. Could he be your small ball 5 at some point? Could he play some 5 defensively? Could he be your rim protector eventually? Not looking like that. Not if the body hasn't developed yet, and maybe it's just still a situation about being young. That's fine. But hey, man, the game winner, you know, big moment for him. Like let's not. Maybe I should have even led with that. Forgive me for being 23 minutes in. I know you mentioned it. For being 23 minutes in and not even mention the game winner. The kid has a disposition about him and an attitude about him, I feel like, that is positive and lends itself toward making the improvements that we're talking about. So I feel like the fans that are listening to this podcast should, at the very least, with Jabari Smith specifically, should feel really good that, or about the idea of him continuing to improve his game, and shots like the one that you saw on Friday night and the one that you saw, who was it against during the season when they had the old school court out there where he hit that game winner?
New Orleans.
Shots like the game against New Orleans, that is in him. That is in Jabari Smith, and you just hope that you see it on a more consistent basis. This is an example, I should say, an example of what's in there.
It is. And the one thing that you would hear about him, even going back to summer league practice last year, was just his competitiveness. And I think that was probably one of the skill. I don't know. I guess I consider competitiveness a skill, because if you don't have it, you're not going to be the same player. Then, you know,
it's certainly an attribute. Skill, it's an attribute for sure.
I think it's incredibly important to have guys who are competitive, and I think that's one of the things that really stood out about him. But I think we've talked about this before, but there was always the assumption that his skills would easily translate just because it's shooting and it's defense. And, oh, hey, that, you know, it's,
yeah, I thought so.
But I think we kind of discounted that it's harder in the NBA. Like,
yeah.
The 3-point line, it's further away. You are facing guys who are much bigger. And so the closeouts are going to be totally different. You know, you're playing against better, you know, I guarantee, I'd have to look, but I would imagine that he got a whole lot more clean looks at Auburn than he did last year. And just like the level of defense and just the level of attention that he was getting was totally different. And, you know, even on the shots that were contested, you know, he was probably taking contested threes at Auburn over guys who were like 6'5". Now in the NBA, you're trying to get up contested shots over guys who are 6'10". It's very, very different. So just the level of physicality, the number of games that you have to play, you know, at Auburn, you're playing twice a week. You know, you're playing one game during the week. You are playing one game on the weekend, and that's it. And kind of depending on how deep you go into your conference tournament, you will probably only play back-to-backs once. That's just the conference tournament. That's it. The NBA, you go from so you're going from playing 2 games a week to playing sometimes 4 games a week or 5 games in 8 days. Like, it's a grind. It's a really hard transition, and I don't think that people necessarily understand, and I don't think that we kind of give it enough credit for just how difficult the transition can be. And in college, you're playing 30 games. I mean, you're playing 30 in the NBA, you're playing 30 games. You're at game 30 in December. In college, you're playing, you're playing 30 games going from November until March. So it's just a much harder schedule in the NBA. And so I think it's difficult. And I think that it probably needs to be appreciated just how difficult that transition can be.
No doubt about it. So Jabari Smith was their best player. I think we can agree on that. Hit the game winner, had 33 points, monster second half, especially the third quarter, and obviously the game winner, as we mentioned. But I would say, feel free to disagree with this, but I would say that Tari Eason was arguably their most consistent player throughout the night. 20 points, 10 rebounds. The 20 came on 7 of 14 shooting, so 50% from the field, 2 of 4 from 3, 4 of 6 from the free throw line. I mentioned the jump shot to open the game. He had a couple of punches. I thought he was really very much on brand for the Tari Eason that we had come accustomed to throughout the season, and maybe even a little bit better. Like, I don't know if a little bit more polish is the right word, but I don't know. Maybe it's the year of season, the one season of seasoning on his game that makes him look a little bit better to me. Maybe that's it. But I thought Tari Eason was basically the player that we know him to be. And really, I view him as, we talked about this before as well, I view him as a Udoka guy, very much a Udoka guy in terms of someone who's going to get after it, do the little things, be willing to score, be willing to pass, and he's not a great passer, but just be willing to do everything, all the little things, get down on the ground and get after loose balls and just be that tone setter. I mean, maybe that's the best way to put it. He feels like he sets the tone of what you want your identity as a team to be, even if he's not necessarily your most skilled player. What do you think of Tari tonight?
I thought he was a guy who looked just to be experienced. And I think that we talk about all these young guys. Eason's 22, and he's got 2 college seasons, 2 major college seasons under his belt, plus an NBA season under his belt. So he should be like, this should be easy for him just because of the level of competition that he's been playing at now for the last 3 years, playing at Cincinnati as a freshman in the American, and then at LSU his sophomore year, and then playing a full 82-game NBA season. So I think that this level of competition for him is probably easy compared to what he's had. So I think that he looked exactly how he should have looked. And I think you said it right. He's not going to be your best player, but he is going to complement your best players perfectly, and that's what he did today. So I think that whether the best teammate that he's got is Jabari Smith or whether it's Fred VanVleet, he is going to complement that best teammate in just a perfect way. That's what he did today. I don't know. He's the one guy who I don't really think we need to see in Summer League. I kind of think that it was fine for them to have Jabari Smith out there because it was not an easy freshman season for him last year. It was a little bit different for Eason. I don't know if Eason gets a whole lot out of these games, but you'll take it anyways. And you see production and you see him winning and you see him contribute to winning. And that's what you want to see. You want to see these guys contribute to winning at this point because there hasn't been a whole lot of winning the last couple of years. And so if you can kind of get that winning type of mentality, then I think that helps you moving forward in the future. And I think that today was a really good start to that. Again, I'm really interested to see how much he actually plays, him and Jabari Smith. I'm interested to see how much they play the rest of Summer League moving forward, because Rockets only played 9 guys today, and one of those guys played 7 minutes. And I'm pretty sure Darius Days would have played if he were healthy, and I imagine we'll see him at some point on the floor. But Portland played 13 guys, the Rockets played 9. Kind of a very interesting little, parallel.
Yeah, for sure. On Tari and Jabari, before we move on to the rookies, am I crazy for, like, in my mind, the combination of those two guys, Jabari Smith Jr. and Tari Eason, and I know Jabari is mostly a 4, can maybe play some small ball 5, especially if he gets stronger. And it's still an open question, I think, at this point on how much he can contribute to you on the perimeter. I think he's mostly a 4. We probably can agree on that. But between the two of them, they were a large part of the reason why I didn't feel like they necessarily needed Dillon Brooks. And I'm not saying that either one of them is as good as Dillon Brooks. I don't think that that's the case. Dillon Brooks is an experienced player and all defensive, all NBA defensive type. I'll give him credit for that. But I'm looking at Tari and I'm like, man, I feel like with a couple of years, with some development, and he's got to figure some things out defensively, sure. And just overall, still a young player. And I get it. He's a little bit older than the really young players on this team, but he's got to figure out some things before he's on Dillon Brooks's level defensively or just even as a player. But I see that in them. I see it, especially in Tari. Like, I'm like, man, I feel like Tari Eason could be a much more self-aware version of Dillon Brooks one day. I don't know how long that takes. I don't know what his trajectory is, and it's probably not a perfect player comparison. I don't think they're like apples to apples player comparison, so I'm not trying to do that. But in terms of functionality, what they mean to you, as a team, am I crazy for have thought that they've got potential versions of this, specifically in Tari Eason, and hopefully something even better than that in Jabari Smith as the number 3 overall pick at one point, that that maybe these guys could be what they're looking for in Dillon Brooks?
Maybe, but to me, like Brooks to me is more of like a perimeter defender.
Yeah,
and
sure.
and I think Eason can do that, but I also think that he can help you around the rim too. He can guard bigger players, and we saw this a little bit last year where they played Minnesota in that one game where they hid Şengün on Kyle Anderson, and they put Eason on Rudy Gobert. So I think that he can do that a little bit better than what somebody like Dillon Brooks could do. I think Dillon Brooks is probably one of the best perimeter defenders in the league. Eason obviously isn't there yet, but I do think that he gives you – I think that Eason can be a versatile defender. I just think that he would probably be better defending guys closer to the rim, not necessarily as a rim defender, but just as a guy who can just get into passing lanes and be disruptive there, whereas Brooks is a more, I'm going to lock you up along the perimeter. So I think that's the difference between the two.
Fair enough. So let's get into the rookies, man. I thought that they were both, solid enough. Still a lot of work to be done. They're rookies after all. Let's not be overly critical. I thought they were solid enough, specifically Amen Thompson. We can go one by one. Amen Thompson, Cam Whitmore, both obviously make their debuts, first summer league game, so they make their debuts. They're on the court with Tari Eason and Jabari Smith Jr. So, again, we mentioned this at the top of the show, but that was just, I thought, fun and fascinating to see these first-round picks, 4 of them together, of the last couple of years. And then, of course, there's Jalen Green and Alperen Şengün not participating in Summer League, obviously, but they're on the team as well. So you think about these 6 first-round picks, this culmination of talent that you got, and 4 of them out there together. Amen Thompson, 16 points, 5 assists, was 6 of 13 from the field, 3 or 4 from free throw line, hit a 3. There's, of course, that question about his jump shot, but did hit a 3 for whatever it's worth. I thought that he, for the most part, looked like a floor general. When you're going against Scoot Henderson, that was one of the things that stood out to me, was that Scoot Henderson was just a clearly, obviously better and I would say more ready-made, like star potential kind of guy. Like, he stood out a lot more. But Amen Thompson held his own. To me, looked like a floor general, and he's special when he's downhill. Like, a special athlete, a special ball handler. I think finishes around the rim very well. what were your impressions of watching the twin out there? And we'll get to Whitmore in a second.
I thought he looked really good. I came off impressed. It's really the first time that I've seen him in a game environment, and I just the floor general aspect, like you said, I thought was really impressive. Just him in the pick and roll, finding guys on the move. I thought was really. I just thought he looked terrific, and I thought that he would be a guy who we wouldn't see a whole lot of this season, and he might be a little bit more ready than what I thought. Now, some of the holes in his game will obviously that'll get people will take advantage of those as we move forward just in an NBA season. But I thought if this is the baseline, that's a really solid baseline. And he took 13 shots today. Do you know how many of the 13 shots came in the paint?
I'm going to take a guess. I'm not going to look at the numbers. I'm going to take a guess. I'm going to say 13 shots. How many came in the paint? I can think of a couple of jump shots. I'm going to say 11.
Yeah, you got it right.
Yeah.
That's pretty good, though.
I swear to God to you, I did not look that up.
It took me a while to find this. I had to go find the shot chart. But to me, that's impressive to take 13 field goal attempts in a game and 11 of them to come in the paint. Like, that's not something that you necessarily see from young guys. You'll see them jack up a lot of shots, and we'll get into that in a minute when we talk about Cam Whitmore. But his ability to get in the paint, his ability to get into the paint is real. And that's a skill that, to me, it's really impressive. He had a nice floater from, I don't know, maybe 10 feet out. That was impressive. He's got to get a little listen, this is going to be, you can say this about everyone, but he's got to get a little bit more efficient from the rim. But I think that he can certainly get there. But just his ability to get there, his ability to make plays for others, I just thought was impressive. And he made the 1-3 that he took. But I think that it's encouraging that he's not just jacking them up. You'll see guys, and we talk about we've witnessed that the last couple of years. They got plenty of guys who will just jack up bad shots. He's not going to do that, and so I think that that's pretty encouraging that he's not this guy who's going to take 7 threes a game and make 20% of them. So it's an encouraging start for him. Again, it looked like he rolled his ankle towards the end of the game, so we'll see how much we see him moving forward in Vegas. But it's an encouraging start for him. And I remember 2 years ago being at Summer League, and there was just kind of the feeling with Alperen Şengün that, well, they don't really, he's not going to play a whole lot in year one. And then all of a sudden you watch him in Summer League, like, well, why they sign Daniel Theis? They don't really need Daniel Theis. They have Şengün. And at one point, Şengün just shoved Daniel Theis out of the way, and he was starting to get consistent minutes. I'm not saying that's going to happen with Fred VanVleet, but
it better not. It damn sure better not.
But there is kind of that, like, hey, this kid might be ready to contribute in year one, and we went and gave this point guard a whole lot of money. So I think it's interesting at this point. But that being said, VanVleet, we talked about this last week, and VanVleet's going to help them a lot. But maybe Amen Thompson is ready to contribute a little earlier than we thought.
I felt goofy for this, Adam. The last time we talked, our last episode, I'm thinking in my head, and I can't remember how much we talked about this off the top of my head right now. It's late. But I'm trying to remember, like, when we recorded the last time, and maybe it was the time before that, but very recently, obviously, since they drafted Amen Thompson, I've been of the mind, I've been of the thinking, why can't he? What's preventing him from contributing right away? And that's not to put extra pressure on him, undue pressure on him, to just be like a gas bag and just say, hey, throw the rookie out there because I want to see him type of thing. But I'm thinking, like, if he's every bit the player that they say he is, or that they want him to be, what's stopping him on a team like this? When, look, with respect to Fred VanVleet, if Amen Thompson is anywhere close to his potential now, and I'm not saying that he is, I'm just saying if he is, to hell with that. Like, let's see what that kid looks like out there. Like, the projection on Amen Thompson and what he could be, and some of the flashes and glimpses of what we saw in this game are, hey, that's your point guard of the future, man. You drafted him number 4 overall for a reason, not just because number 4 fell into your lap and you lucked out and didn't get to, you didn't get to get Victor Wembanyama, you didn't get to get Scoot Henderson, you didn't get to get Brandon Miller. No, you intentionally drafted Amin Thompson. So I'm thinking of, okay, if his player profile is what everybody's been hyping it up to be, and if he's anywhere close to that, let's see how the thing translates, and then let's go from there. I'm very intrigued by, how about this, Adam? Let's just start here. Even if he's coming off the bench, which we expect to be the case, they signed Fred VanVleet to $100+ million, $130-something million contract. We get it. How much have they improved at backup point guard? If that's what he looks like, and I don't want to overreact to a summer league game.
Well, for Porter too.
Yeah, and well, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
And Porter is just like a luxury at that point from the point guard standpoint. Hopefully they're using him more so from an off-ball standpoint. Like, that's what I think you and I both envision for him. And then he's a luxury point guard option, or a luxury sort of extra ball handler creator, shot creator, so to speak. So like now you've got some sort of depth chart of Fred VanVleet, Amin Thompson, Kevin Porter Jr. as your playmakers, as your point guards, as opposed to Kevin Porter Jr. and what, I wonder what that's going to mean for them as a team overall. Not to say, and we've done this exercise already, looking at the rest of the West and saying, hey, who are they better than? It's hard to really find too many teams that stand out, that the Rockets are better than. But in that particular area where they needed to get better, point guard specifically, or at the very least needed to get deeper, they've got Fred VanVleet, a well-respected, accomplished, winning point guard in this league, starting caliber point guard. Amin Thompson, who just based off of this small sample size, looks like he might be ready to, at the very least, be a backup point guard in the NBA. And Kevin Porter Jr. still on the team. It feels pretty good. It feels like it should feel pretty good for them.
Well, you look at that 20-game stretch in the middle of last season where they left Steven Silas without a point guard. I mean, I don't think that they won't be in that situation anymore. And so if something happens with VanVleet, you have Porter, you have Thompson, they're going to have somebody who can at least play that position now. Whereas last year there was a fourth of the season where they were playing without a point guard. So at least they have that. I don't, it's hard not to overreact sometimes to Summer League. I'm going to try not to, and I'm going to assume that some of his weaknesses would turn into Achilles heels once you get into an NBA season. The shooting, just the youth of playing that position, I think that makes it hard to be a good NBA point guard at this stage of his career, and it will probably benefit him to sit back and just kind of watch, and that might help the game move a little bit slower for him. But it's just encouraging. It's one of those things that it was just encouraging to see him play Summer League at a high level, and it gives you some confidence moving forward that, hey, this is the guy. This guy is what you drafted. This is what you thought you were drafting, and it looks like that he's going to be able to be a really good player. Again, I'm basing this off of 28 minutes in a Summer League game, which ultimately won't mean a whole lot, but it's a positive step. It's something that, like, all the skills that we were told that he possessed, he showed those off tonight. And I think that's important. And I'm interested to see, we'll see what happens with the ankle if he's able to go on Sunday in their second game. But again, it's a positive. Like, that's all you can say. Like, he showed that he has the ability, he has the talent, he has the tools to be a really good NBA player. And that's what you want it for. And I think that it's probably good for him that there's just not going to be the same sort of pressure on him in his rookie season that Jalen Green had and that Jabari Smith Jr. had. So as good as he looked today, I was at Jalen Green's first Summer League game 2 years ago. He looked good, but you know what? He really struggled coming out of the gates as a rookie. I wasn't at Jabari Smith's first Summer League game. I was at his second and third Summer League games, and he looked good. Again, that didn't necessarily translate to his rookie season because they were asking so much for both those guys. They were asking so much of both of them. So I don't think it hurts to not ask that much of Amin Thompson in year one.
So Cam Whitmore, he stands out physically and has an edge about him that I can respect and that I really like. But how long do you think it's going to take for them to teach him what the difference is between a good shot and a bad shot? Because I like his heart. I like the physicality. I like what I feel like he represents. But man, 14 points, on 18 shots, 5 of 18 from the field, shot a few free throws, 1 of 6 from the 3-point, 11 rebounds. Again, a physical, I think, physically superior to most, or to at least most that he's going to find in the summer league. We'll see how that works out in the actual NBA, but just didn't seem to have sort of the opposite, I would say, of Amen Thompson in this way, where a thing that stood out about Thompson was his feel for the game. He seems to have, especially as somebody that hasn't played what I would say is high level, in overtime elite. The question is like, okay, the level of competition. For the level of competition, whatever you want to say about it, he seems to have a good, pretty decent feel for the game. Whitmore, not quite as much. What do you think is the learning curve there? What were some of your impressions of him in his first summer league appearance?
He likes to shoot.
Doesn't he?
He never met a shot he doesn't like.
Man, he was trying to get buckets, wasn't he?
Yeah, he basically, whenever he touched it, he shot it. 14 points on 18 shots. It's not going to be, obviously that's not an efficient number at all.
No.
But that's kind of what he was in college. And we have seen over the last 6-7 years, these Villanova guys come in and they're just ready to go. And they all are excellent players. Going back from the 2016 team that won the championship, then you have the 2018 team, and all these other Nova guys have come into the league and been very good. He's different though, because I don't know this for sure, but most of those other Villanova guys weren't one and dones. And all those other Villanova guys played for Jay Wright. And Cam Whitmore was a one and done, and Cam Whitmore did not play for Jay Wright. So it's a different sort of Villanova player. Just you look at, like, the physical tools are real. Like, there is a reason why people had him possibly going fourth in the draft. He's just, the tools are what they are. And those tools can't be taught. But he's going to shoot a lot, and he's not necessarily going to be efficient. He's not like you just look at Villanova this year. He played in 26 games. He finished with 19 assists. So that's less than 1 assist a game, and he had the ball a lot. 42 turnovers and 19 assists. So, I mean, that's more than 1 turnover for every assist.
Yeah.
That's a 1 to 2, basically.
Not ideal. Not ideal.
And so that's where there's going to be a learning curve with him. We just talked about how Amen Thompson might be a little bit more ready to play year one than we anticipated. I don't think that's going to be the case with Cam Whitmore. I think that Cam Whitmore is going to spend a lot of time in the G League. He might score 30 a game in the G League. But I think that will be good to get him in that system, to get him in that program, just to get him into maybe a little bit more structure. Because I think that's one thing that he's really going to need, and just work on his overall game. Like, again, there's the talent with him is real, and he turns actually. Let's see, we're doing this. It's 9:50 in Vegas, so he turns 19 in 2 hours and 10 minutes. His birthday is tomorrow, so he'll turn 19 in 2 hours and 10 minutes. So he's every day.
So audience, 18 years old as of the time we're recording this podcast and when he played, and 19 by the time you likely listen to this, basically.
His birth, he's from Maryland. In Maryland, he's 19. In Vegas, he's still 18. But that's the point, though. He's incredibly young. And it is very rare that you draft a guy at 18 now. And he was young when he's a summer birthday. So that's basically an Alperen Şengün thing. Alperen Şengün was drafted when he was 18. That's basically what you have right now with Cam Whitmore. So he's incredibly raw. It's going to take a lot of time. I did not think that he would contribute. And I did not think he'd contribute a lot as a rookie, just based off of who they have in front of him at that position. And watching him play today, it just reminds you that, it's going to take some time. It's not one of those things that is going to come overnight, and that's okay. Let him go to the G League, let him get his feet wet there, let him get the reps there. I don't think that's going to hurt him at all. It doesn't take away from just the natural ability that he has. He showed that at times today, but he's got to rein it in a little bit.
No doubt, man. Look, it's late. Let's wrap it up, man. This is all really good. I think that we've got plenty of material here to follow throughout the rest of Summer League. Again, wish you were out there chronicling it for us live and in color and in person, but instead we'll be watching it on TV, on apps, and however else we can get it. You and I are hosting the morning show on Sports Radio 610 next week. I guess a decent consolation prize for not being in Las Vegas where we belong, but I digress. We're going to have fun with that, and we're going to talk a lot about this. We'll do it on the morning show. We'll do it on the H-Town Hoops podcast. So, to the audience, make sure that you are subscribing, rating, reviewing, sharing the podcast, telling people about the podcast. That helps us grow the audience. That helps us a great deal. And I think just helps it's for the greater good. So like just look at it like that. It's for the overall greater good. So for Adam Spolane, Austin Mendez handling things for us behind the scenes. We'll be back next week with more Summer League coverage. In the meantime, make sure you check this out in addition to the morning show on Sports Radio 610 on the Odyssey app. I am Brandon Scott. Until next time, y'all be good.